Yes. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the regular committee meeting of our Committee of the Whole meeting for Wednesday, March 22nd. My name is Ian Morrison, the Director for Electoral Area F, Couch and Lake South, Scotts Falls. I'll be chairing the meeting today. I want to thank Director Martman for his excellent territorial and lands acknowledgement this morning. And just a note that some of the teachings that I've had is when you've started and someone's done an opening or done an acknowledgement that we're ready to go for the day, and it's not a necessity to actually embark on one of those at the beginning of each meeting. So with that, I will turn to, first of all, we have Director McClinton. Is he with us remote? I see a camera off somewhere there. I'd like to welcome Alternate Director Champ to the meeting today, and with that, Mr. Robbins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. I'm Patrick Robbins, the Corporate Officer for the CVRD. On your agenda, first off, approval of the agenda as circulated.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Not opposed. Motion carries.
Moving through adoption of minutes. M1, a recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of February 22nd, 2023 be adopted.
Moved by Director McGonigal, second by Director Stone. Any discussion, errors or omissions? All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
M2, the recommendation that the minutes of the Committee of the Whole meeting of March 8th, 2023 be adopted.
Moved by Alternate Director Champ, seconded by Director Stone. Any discussion, errors or omissions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries.
We're not aware of any business arising from those minutes, which then moves you to public input period, the opportunity for members of the public to provide a comment on an agenda item before this committee. We have no one online.
I'd like to welcome anyone in the gallery that would like to provide input on the agenda items today to please come forward now. Going once, going twice, going three times. Mr. Robbins, the next item on the agenda.
Moving through your agenda, we're going to agenda item 8, reports. R1 is a report from the Economic Development Division with regards to the Cowichan Regional Internet and Cellular Connectivity Strategy. Our consultant partners, IBI, are going to provide a bit of a presentation for you, and there is a recommendation associated with this report.
Do we get to see Mr. O'Riordan at the start?
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and Directors. Barry O'Riordan, Manager at Economic Development Cowichan, and the purpose of this report is to provide an overview of the Cowichan Internet and Cellular Connectivity Strategy, which provides a regional approach to connectivity services for the region. So in your agenda package, you'll see the connectivity strategy along with a series of appendices, and thank you for all the reading that you would have went through. The strategy includes a regional connectivity strategy report as well as a regional infrastructure assessment report, the assessment report you would have already received, as well as 4 individual community plans for the region most unserved communities. As mentioned, IBI consultants are here with us today, and they'll provide an overview of the report and the individual community plans. So I'd just like to hand us over to IBI team to introduce themselves and provide a presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry, and let's go to our guests who are with us online.
Hello and good morning. Trusting everyone can hear me. My name is Keith Ponton. I'm a director with IBI Group, and I'm pleased to introduce my colleagues Mitch Taylor and John George, and I will hand the floor to John George to carry the presentation.
Perfect.
Thank you.
And first, I'd like to thank you all for having us here today to present this. We have a fair number of slides to present. I think it totals somewhere close to 36 slides. I do want to keep the presentation as short as possible in the vicinity of 20 minutes or so. So please forgive me if we fly by some of these screens in a hurry. First, I'd like to start, Mitch, if you could move on to the next slide, please. The current state. So the project consisted of a number of different segments, starting with a current state analysis and assessment, and we used available federal, provincial, and local data, including data from some of the service providers that we were able to garner. We supplemented the assessment with speed tests through an engagement with the communities, and then provided a gap analysis and prioritized some of the local communities for further analysis with a community roadshow followed by a connectivity strategy deliverable with the 4 connectivity plans for the various areas. Mitch, if you could move on to the next slide, please. You'll notice that results from the engagement were not overly surprising. This slide talks to service satisfaction, with only 52% of residents and participants being satisfied with their internet speed, 56% with internet reliability. 40% of respondents were satisfied with the level of customer service they received from their service providers, and only 34% were satisfied with cellular coverage. Next slide. Regional engagement results for cellular connectivity. Interesting that 50% of respondents have either no cellular coverage or frequently experience dropped calls, and 49% have a landline telephone. From an affordability perspective, 66% were paying over $90 a month for internet services. 14% mostly are fully satisfied with the cost value, while others feel that high usage costs contribute to the lack of an appropriate internet service, and 57% wouldn't pay more for any of their services. When we went further into the exercise, we identified a proposed vision for Cowichan Valley as a connected community with appropriate and efficient mix of technologies deployed throughout the region, providing affordable access and connectivity to all homes and businesses. Primarily to enhance the livability of the communities, enabling businesses, employment, healthcare, education, security, and social and family connections for residents of all backgrounds and income levels. What we found with the current state on an overall perspective from the overall regional district was that 96% of premises were served or appeared to be served with the minimum viable broadband service, which is 50 megabits down and 10 megabits upload speeds. only 67% of road segments were served, and there were about 23 of the communities that we looked at that where speed tests that were done challenged the actual data from the federal governments. So just adding a little bit of question to the results. We then go into, because this is a technology strategy or a technical strategy, we were obliged to insert a couple of technical slides. So Mitch, the next slide talks to the preferred technology for fiber to the home or for broadband connectivity, which is fiber. And that is because of its future-friendly characteristics, being able to scale up and provide higher and higher speeds as technology evolves. The typical network topologies are depicted here. Some of the terminology can get rather confusing, but this slide was intended to show a typical network with backbone fiber reaching from service providers' central servers out into the points of presence in the communities, and then and as well to cellular towers, and then distribution from those locations out to local houses. The term backhaul tends to refer to cellular services, as the backbone is used to backhaul traffic from that tower to the service provider's network. The report then delivered 28 recommendations across 5 different categories with high, medium, or low prioritization. The categories include advocate and facilitate, affordability, digital literacy and technology, infrastructure, policy, and cellular coverage. We won't go through all of these recommendations individually, as they are covered in the report, but you can see from the advocate and facilitate number of recommendations, then down into affordability. Mitch, you can continue on down through, please. We have gone down to the high priority recommendations, and there are a number of high priority recommendations that was felt that the Economic Development Division was best suited to lead these activities, and they include develop policy around requests for support letters for grant funding from different parties. Facilitate ongoing discussions and engagement with communities, service providers, funders, utilities, internal CVRD divisions, and higher levels of government. Consider forming a connectivity committee. Mitch, you can keep going down, please, to the high level or the high priority requirements or recommendations. Support the first 4 prioritized communities in implementing their respective community connectivity plans. And those plans were captured in the appendices of the report. And then review, advocate for provincial support and or establish strong dig once policies. This is an approach to try and put everything in the ground at once, rather than reopening the ground time after time after time to make incremental changes. It also will have the government bodies look, and the works departments consider putting any conduits in the ground that they can for telecommunications or for broadband connectivity as they undergo other roadworks. So as you undergo roadwork in a section, it's relatively inexpensive to insert a conduit for future use. And as time goes on, we have more and more segments of road with conduit embedded, so that it makes sense to, at some point in time, use that conduit for broadband connectivity. Then review, advocate provincial support and or establish strong the dig once policies, establish CRVD and advocate for municipal corporate dig once policies as well. Review and align zoning and tower siting policies to reduce timelines and barriers to development. So part of the view around tower policies and siting policies would also be to structure the policies such that we encourage the first build while discouraging secondary builds of towers. Quite often in the private sector, service providers don't typically want to share facilities. They prefer to own their own facilities and infrastructure. Yet from a visual perspective, we don't necessarily want so many towers around the area. So siting policies and dig once type policies can be applied to help shorten the time frame to get the first tower into place, but then put barriers in place to build the second tower until the first tower is fully utilized. Finally, then to develop a robust cellular connectivity strategy for the Cowichan region. From there, we went into priority underserved communities and developed individual plans for each of these communities. The first one being Thetis Island and Penelakut Island bundled into one. Then Dididat, Cowichan Station, and the Cowichan Lake area. Within the Thetis and Penelakut Islands, we have two diverse communities of people. The Thetis Island has a strong sense of community and responsibility. They have a more aging and affluent population, and they need broadband to help attract and retain younger, diverse population, enable work from home, and reduce traveling off the island. In the Penelakut Island side, its First Nation residents have strong ancestral ties to the land. They treasure having family, schools, health, and daycare on the island, and they need broadband to help support e-health and access to support services, improved education and employment opportunities, and better connect friends and family to the community itself. Some of the challenges that were identified in these two communities were in Thetis Island, we have at least 2 applications for grant funding to provide connectivity. We have you can see from the graphs that 84% of the roads are unserved and 79% of premises are unserved from the perspective of broadband. And key challenges to build are topology, vegetation for the wireless cellular coverage, and cellular service provider reporting. What we are finding is that service provider coverage maps may show full coverage with 5G networks and so on, but ground truths tell us something different. And the experience of residents in the area certainly reflects some differences. On Penelakut Island, there was a project in 2019 to build fiber to the homes. There's only 1% of the homes that are underserved. However, there are some issues with regards to usage of the services, and it tends to point to affordability, among other things. So we have a number of recommendations for that. Strategic options. For Thetis Island, we're recommending that we support the federal UBF applications for funding to build broadband networks. I believe there were 2 applications out from from 2 of the service providers in the area. And we're also suggesting that we take some activity or take on some action to document coverage gaps from a cellular perspective and hold the carriers to account for discrepancies in their reporting. So some of the ways we can do that are to advocate with the CRTC, who regulate the cellular carriers, and bring up discrepancies to them and help to influence the service providers to improve their coverage locally. On the Penelakut Island side, we're recommending engaging with the nation. Pathways to Technology and TELUS. Pathways to Technology project funded the TELUS fiber to the home build, and we want to get some discussions going around affordability issues, argue for rate reductions based on provided funding. Investigate options for the nation, perhaps to provide internet as a utility to to any premises in the area or within the nation. And to document again the coverage and performance issues and help to hold the carriers to account. A map here will show the various areas and potential opportunities to include or to build new cellular towers. But we're suggesting that we really advocate and work with the cellular providers to force their hand to get them to improve coverage. Next is Dididat Nation, and Dididat Nation was quite interesting due to their isolation. I found it especially interesting given the reasons that they need connectivity, things that we tend to take for granted for those communities that have connectivity. And that includes things like being able to leverage the capabilities of cash registers in retail operations, or even being able to update the software on fuel pumps. Things that just are normal to us in populated areas that they don't have out there. They're also looking for weather and dock cameras so they can monitor their fishing fleet. They'd like to be able to work from home and partake in remote learning opportunities. The current state, 100% of the roads are underserved and the premises are underserved as well from the perspective of the federal data that drives all of the grant applications. There's also a real lack in competition. There is some connectivity to the community, but not very high speed. We do have some distribution to the premises, but it is questionable from a survivability perspective, if you will. Connected Coast has a planned landing site in the community, and some of the issues challenges are broadband affordability, community control of security, and of course the remote location and isolation of the community. The two strategic options that we looked at was one was to engage City West for open access fiber to the home from proposed Connected Coast landing site, and that involves the construction of approximately 6 kilometers of fiber to the 75 or so premises in the community. Established cost at $60 a meter and $1,000 a premise comes up to $435,000 to undertake that work. And when we look at funding, grants are available to 70% of the construction costs. ISPs would pick up typically up to about $2,500 per household is where their business case starts to make sense for their prioritization of investment, and that would cover the cost. So there wouldn't be any expectation of additional community costs to have that done. If we go the other route in option 2 and look at resolving some of the backhaul issues or restrictions that TELUS have, we could either enhance their microwave for about $800,000 or build 60 kilometers of new fiber, which would be about $3.6 million. Then to resolve the Conuma cable fiber issues, again, we'd be looking at building approximately 6 kilometers of fiber to the 75 or so premises for $435,000. Once we look at the various grants and $2,500 per home investment that an ISP would be expected to approve, community would be left with about $183,000 or $1.1 million, depending on the technical option to resolve the backhaul issues. So certainly option 1 makes sense if there's no additional community investment required to make that happen. It also has the advantage of bringing in competition by bringing City West through Connected Coast in competition with TELUS and Conuma Cable. The next community plan was based around Cowichan Station. And Cowichan Station is important for connectivity for Cowichan Station is important to provide better education opportunities, better connect friends and family, improve access to telehealth services, and to community services registrations. The current state and challenges. So we have about 46% of the roads unserved and 29% of residences or premises in the area unserved. There's poor and aging infrastructure in place and a lack of competition. Topology and vegetation overgrowth impact placement of any aerial or buried fiber infrastructure. And there's no wireless coverage down at the Kinsale-Trestle area. There was a noticeable public resistance to wireless infrastructure in Cowichan Station, much more so than in other areas that we engaged. So the strategic options for Cowichan Station. Option 1 would be to build a new community-owned network to all community premises. giving the community full control of current and future technologies. It enables service provider competition because we can build in various sites where all the service providers can connect to the network to provide services to the end premises. It involves building a network to 635 premises along 73 kilometers of road for an expected cost of just under $6 million. Now, grants are only available to 70% of, or to cover costs of construction to 70% of the, or sorry, of 70% of the cost to the underserved premises only, not to all premises. So we have $1.6 million worth of grant funding available. A partner, our P3 partner, to come in and operate the network on behalf of the community would be expected to make an investment of approximately $3,000 per premise, leaving about $3,700 per premise remaining for funding that would fall to the community to provide. The other option is only to subsidize an existing ISP to expand to underserved premises in the area. That would involve only $184,000 of community expense, which equates to about $1,000 per premise. However, it's felt by the community they were quite strong on wanting control of the various technologies, and option 2 does fall short on that. It also falls short on because it limits competition. We'd only be working with one ISP to expand their network to the underserved premises. So moving on to the map, this will show the Cowichan Station area, building out fiber along all of the roadways to all of the premises in the area. And you can see points of presence, 2 points of presence, so that we have resilient connectivity for various service providers, and a spur built out to the potential connected coast landing site to bring in additional competition from City West, should they wish to connect to the area. Then moving on to the Cowichan Lake area. So Cowichan Lake area includes all of the communities surrounding the lake, and they're looking for connectivity for somewhat different reasons, primarily to enable work from home and attract new residents to the area. They don't have as many reservations over wireless, so they were interested in improving cellular coverage for safety of people in the parks and to improve coverage around the lake itself. Current state. Now, these slides, I apologize, they do get a little bit congested because of the number of communities that we looked at. But you can see the relative number of underserved roads and underserved premises. Some of the issues and challenges are a lack of competition and choice with high capacity transport to and from the communities, and from the perspective of fiber distribution to the premises. There is very limited, if any, fiber to the homes in the area. It was quite questionable, and very limited high capacity transport as well from which to leverage. This comes down now to strategic options, and again, I truly apologize for the size of the font. We went through and developed a phased approach to build out infrastructure in each of the communities, and then estimated the cost for each of the communities, but then combined it all or totaled it all on the right-hand side. So option 1 was to extend fiber out only to the underserved homes, which total about 272 homes, and to build 3 new cellular towers to improve coverage. That totaled up about $4 million in estimated costs. About $2.3 million would be available in grants, and it would require a total investment, or a community investment, of about $1,100 or $1,200 per home. To subsidize service providers to come in and do that. Now, if we add KCOOS into the mix as well, That adds an additional $1.6 million in capital, and it raises the community required funding up to about $2,500 per home. So quite a large chunk per home to provide connectivity only to the underserved areas. That still leaves the served households with older technology that may not be suitable in too long into the future. Option 2 was then, instead of just building fiber to the underserved homes, let's look at building fiber to all homes around the lake. And that's approximately 3,300 homes, and build the 3 new cellular towers as well. Again, a phased approach to this. It increases the total project capital to about 13 million, 12.7, 12.8 million dollars. The same number of dollars are available in grants because grants only cover construction to the underserved homes. But as we go through the potential funding, we find that because we're now spreading the costs or amortizing the costs across all 3,300 homes, it brings the community investment down to about $403 per home instead of $1,200 a home. And when we add Kaikous into the mix, should we continue this across to the Kaikous area as well, it adds again the $1.6 million in capital to the project, and it increases the community expected funding per home from $403 to about $522. So then the recommendation would be to try and move with option 2 and build out, to option 2 and build out to all homes around the lake, such that the community funding could be brought down to a level that is affordable on a per household basis. This approach improves the safety on the roadways and lakes by improving cellular coverage. It enables work from home and provides connections to family in the community in response to the community's needs. And that ends the presentation that we have so far. I'd like to open it up now to discussion or questions.
Thank you so much. That was a lot of information to digest, and we've got some folks that know a little bit about what you've got here, and I really like the looks of some of that. I see right now I've got Director Wilson. Is there anyone else that would like to pose a question to our guests? Director Deck, anyone else? Martman and Douglas. Go ahead, Director Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. George. That's all very interesting stuff there. Could you tell me what, excuse me, could you tell me what it means by community owned and also the control of technology, those two terms, please?
Certainly. So community owned would mean that the community itself would provide funding or would fund and end up owning the assets. So the community would own the network assets themselves, and they could contract out through a P3 partner to operate those assets on their behalf.
A follow-up, please, Mr. Chair.
Proceed.
And okay, that's excellent. So
The
it
other-
would only be the community that would pay for that? It doesn't come from CVID funds or anything like that?
So what we're suggesting is that the funding mechanisms for that would include $403 per household if we were to go to every household. Well, that was in the Cowichan Station or Cowichan Lake area. In Cowichan Station, it was a little more, but yes, the thought was that would come from the community and spread those costs across all of the premises in the community.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And I understand what you mean about the lack of competition as well. It's one of the biggest problems that we have, even in my area, which is served very well. Thank you very much.
Mr.
You're very welcome.
Reardon.
And just a point of clarity, likely that would occur either through gas tax funding or the creation of a local area service for the specified area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reardon. Director Deck.
Hello, thank you for the presentation. I'm just wondering where the fiber optic backbone ends as it nears Yubo. It seemed unclear to me, but could be just because I don't understand the complexity.
Right. So as it comes to Yubo, I don't believe there is any fiber backbone in Yubo right now. I believe there are other technologies that extend up that way. I would believe that the fiber backbone would primarily or would come partway across towards Yubo. So then we would need to extend fiber across. I think the overall recommendation of building to all communities would require that we build fiber across all of the roadways in the community to cover anything that's already there.
May I ask?
Follow up?
Yes, please. Okay, so at one point in the report, it says Yubo Mead Creek is served by fiber optic cables, DSL cable, fixed wireless, and satellite.
Yes.
So I'm just wondering where that fiber optic cable ends. It must,
Right. So
where, yeah.
I'm sorry to jump in. Yes, I believe the fiber optic cable extends in very close, only at the end, close to Lake Cowichan or Cowichan Lake. It's at the east end of the Yubo area that we were looking at. I believe there are a couple of cellular towers in that area,
Yes.
and I would not expect the fiber optic backbone to extend much further than the cellular towers.
So
Go ahead.
thank you. So the Subasset Reserve is serviced by cable then, by fiber optic cable?
I'd have to go back through to the current state report.
Oh, okay.
I believe it's got some connectivity. It may not be fiber optic cable. So it has some broadband connectivity, but it may not be fiber.
I could be incorrect, but I understand there's a fiber butt up to the end of Lake Cowichan. There's some connectivity, but very little, and it doesn't extend to Subasset or Yubo or Mead Creek or anything at this point yet.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mitch Taylor here. My understanding of there is existing transport fiber that approaches the highway in and around Cowichan Lake, and that we envisage could be extended out through to Yubo from there. The existing fiber does not go past the. I'm trying to remember the name of the business on the highway there, on the way out to Yubo, but it is just at the junction before the turnoff to Cowichan Lake.
Nisers.
Okay.
Thank you. Go to Director Martman, then Douglas. Anyone else?
Thank you. Just a question for clarity is around when you extend fiber to premises, does
Yes.
that just mean to the end of the driveway, and where is the connecting cost to the actual buildings on the premises?
Right. So what we did include was $1,000 per premise to hang a fiber from the pole out at the roadway into the building to connect the actual building. So when we built the costs, we included costs to build the infrastructure along the roadways, and then costs to hang a drop fiber down into the actual building.
And a follow-up, if I may, and thank you for that. That's helpful. And then the second question is, I'm trying to wrap my head around the information on First Nations and what process you've followed so far to include them in consultation.
So we held a number of online events as well as community discussions, where we ended up going out with a roadshow to once we prioritized the 4 communities, we ended up going out with a roadshow to the 4 areas to discuss the plans, discuss some of their issues, and discuss some of their wants. we also had surveys go out at the beginning of the engagement as well.
Thank you.
So each of the communities were contacted and asked for a response. Unfortunately, we didn't get a response from all of them, but we made several attempts. We not only set up the engagement sessions in each of the communities, but as John mentioned, we also offered survey opportunities for people or communities to provide information as well. So we were proactive in each of the these communities and the region as a whole as well in the early stages of information gathering.
Thank you for that. And before I go to Mr. O'Riordan, being the keeper of the clock to my right here had suggested a sort of a rollout and timeline for getting all the meetings that we have to get done today. I'd just like to remind those that will be speaking next that we're trying to wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so. So if we can be very succinct in our questions, I've added myself to the list. And so we'll go with Director Douglas, McGonigal, Manhassan, myself, but Mr. O'Riordan, you had something to say?
I was just going to add on the conversation around First Nation engagement that Penelakut tribe did send staff out to do surveys to a lot of residents, and there's a really high response rate, which gave us really valuable and detailed information. And then, as with all of the individual community plans, we brought directors and staff for individual areas together once we had a draft available for those, which also included First Nation staff for additional comment and review. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. O'Riordan. Director Douglas.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I've got a couple quick questions. I believe one would be for the presenter and one for staff. So yeah, just first of all, thank the presenter for all the work you did on this. I think it provides a lot of very helpful information that's going to help the regional district and our community advocate to the service providers and to the senior levels of government. One of my questions was just with regards to the recommended actions. I noticed recommendation number 28 is to develop a cellular connectivity strategy, but I was just a bit confused by that, and I'm sure I'm missing some information here, but I'm not clear on why we would have a internet and cellular connectivity strategy, but then recommend out of that to develop a separate cellular connectivity strategy. It seems like this would have been covered with what we're discussing here today.
Who wants to take that? Mr. O'Riordan's at the microphone.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so when we were developing the scope of work for this project, we felt it beneficial, given the connection between internet and cellular technologies, to include some analysis on cellular connectivity. But the main focus of this is addressing funding needs and opportunities for our most underserved communities. So in this strategy, we have an overview look at what cellular connectivity looks like, but not a detailed analysis. So the option going forward would be to do, for example, a full drive test of the whole region to understand what are the exact points within the region where we have poor connectivity, and then options coming out of that could be around where do we actually want to have cell towers within the region, and if we wanted to go that way, then what's the right approach for the region to address our needs, as opposed to this, which is pretty much just high level look at what our cellular needs are.
Your second question?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, the second question relates to the recommendation here. So the recommendation is that we endorse the 28 recommended actions in the report. And I think my one concern with that is we are developing a new economic development strategy later this year. And I'd like some assurance that through that strategic planning process, we're going to be in a position to determine how we want to prioritize some of these recommended actions. Because when I look through all 28 of them, obviously some of them involve less resources than others, but it does look like a significant commitment in terms of staff resources here at the regional district, and just want to make sure that as we develop that new regional strategic plan, we're in a position to determine what exactly we want to prioritize. And perhaps these 28 recommendations are going to be at the top of the list, or maybe they're going to be at the bottom of the list. But just want to, again, make sure that we're in a position to determine those priorities. And also want to suggest related to that, the recommendation is that we endorse the 28, endorse and advance the 28 recommended actions. And perhaps we want to soften the language a bit and say the board commits to considering and advancing the 28 recommendations. I think
Mr. Chair?
CAO has.
I'll go to our CAO, but I'll just recommend that we don't have a resolution on the floor yet, and for everybody to remember exactly what Director Douglas had just said, so he doesn't have to repeat it in 5 minutes. So, Ms. Miles Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know that Mr. Reardon is standing up at the podium as well, but I just wanted to suggest that an alternative could also be just to refer it back to staff, to come back to the board at a future meeting to outline work plan and resourcing considerations, and then and have a further discussion about the timing of implementing recommendations.
And you made a note of that, Director Douglas. Mr. Reardon.
Thank you. Just to add to that, in the report, it does say that the recommendation would allow staff to advance the recommendation initiatives when resources and priorities allow. So I think that kind of speaks to Director Douglas' comments in terms of the development of an ACDEV strategy, and we do have several strategies, already completed in the works, and it'll be really important to prioritize the workload given existing staff resources. So thank you.
Before I go to my next speaker, keep in mind we have 30 minutes scheduled for our next delegation, and we were trying to wrap up by noon so we get the hospital board meeting next. So, and I have on my list Director McGonigal, Manhas, Nicholson, Stone, and myself. Director McGonigal.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And first of all, through you, I'd like to thank the presenter on this very extensive report. Lots of information to digest. Considering some of the language from senior levels of government that internet connectivity is a right for us moving forward in economic development, in community engagement, and in abilities, and yet having it being served by business providers is in itself a problem, I would think. Given those comments, to suggest that the business plan for that provision of the service that is deemed a necessity for economic growth to still be provided by those business providers could be problematic. Any comments on that? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
I can provide comment on that, and influencing private sector companies to invest their money or their capital in any one project can always be a challenge. They have their own rules, their own approaches, their own stakeholders to satisfy. So it does lend itself to the thought of building open community-owned networks that allow service providers to connect in and provide services on an even playing field basis. But there are also instances where service providers are already out there private service providers are already out there to some of the community, and it may make more sense to have them or to influence them to extend their network to the underserved areas rather than trying to overbuild everything and own it in the public sphere.
Thank you very much. And a follow-up, if I may, Mr. Chair. Thank you for taking that on. Again,
You're welcome.
I apologize. I was very interested in looking at the proposal brought forward in the Cowichan Station area, for instance, on the community-based model and a P3 for the providers to piggyback on that. I think the panacea of some people was that this was going to engage high-speed optic fiber to every household, and that was not the intent of this study moving forward, but to show possibilities of how we could get that connectivity moving forward, whether it's community-based or other options. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Director Manhas.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and that's a great segue into my questioning. When we own our own network assets, they'll depreciate and repairs and maintenance will be required on an ongoing basis, which adds cost to our local taxpayers. And my question is about if we approach the existing providers and to serve these underserviced communities, and you had just mentioned that, I think that would be the way to go. We've had cell towers that were planned in Cowichan Bay, in Maple Bay, on Somnos Road, City of Duncan, and they were shot down by the residents, by some residents, and respective councils actually voted against those then. So I don't know how we're going to get around this, even if this is owned, cell tower is owned locally by the local taxpayers. I'm not sure if they'll be able to get the cell towers in places where they have to be. So that's all I have to say.
Right.
Any comment?
Sure, I can take a stab at a comment for you. I agree with some of the challenges in deploying cell towers. And one of the things that we were thinking of with the siting policies and the dig once policies applied appropriately would be to encourage service providers to fill up their towers with sharing their towers with other service providers before building new towers. There are a number of different ways of doing that. The individual service providers can build them, or there are tower providers that already are in the business of building towers and leasing space to other cellular networks. So there are a number of different options to build the towers, to fund it, and to deploy it. It will be critical to go out and communicate appropriately with the community to garner community support before embarking too far down the road on any one tactic.
Thank you. Go to Director Nicholson, Stone, myself, and back to Director Douglas with perhaps a resolution.
Thank you. I really appreciate the report and the work that's gone into making it happen. It's really good to have this kind of information, and it really worries me that basically it boils down to affordability in many areas, and that the reality of what people experience as far as service goes does not meet what service providers tell us they're getting. So to me, the recommendations which are about working with the service providers to try and hold them to account are good, but I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to provide feedback to the province and the federal government about the issues, because these are real issues, and I don't think the grant funding, we can certainly do this, we can be smarter about how we move out with a strategy on connectivity, and we can take advantage of the grants, but it still seems to me that there are some fundamental barriers that are not our jurisdiction that need to be addressed. I think this speaks somewhat to what Director McGonigal was getting at. And then that's one comment. And then my other comment is about the proposal for the Lake Cowichan area. And I think the idea of providing the cellular, or not cellular, the fiber optic all the way out to Kaikous and past Yubo, it seems to me that is a really important decision that needs to be taken into account with the planning, the official community plan. Those are primarily recreational people out there. So whether you want to encourage development by providing that kind of a service out there, I think really is an important decision. Thanks.
Any comment? Go ahead.
The only one around the provincial approach. There is a regional connectivity knowledge network which I sit on, and there's opportunity for board members to sit on that to provide that level of guidance and communication around what's needed at the local level and what provincial actions can be taken. Thank you.
If I may further build on that from a federal perspective, there's actually a parliamentary committee right now exploring the topic of the, I'll say that the mismatch between advertised services versus the subscriber's service experience. So while there is an opportunity to provide input into that, certainly expressing your thoughts and perspective to your federal representatives and being active at the federal level, it adds a voice to existing voices on that topic. And certainly it would be a further advocacy position to take.
Thank you for that, Keith. Go to Director Stone, myself to close questions and comments, and then to Director Douglas. Go ahead, Director Stone.
Here I read this report and was like, wow, what a great step forward. And hearing all these concerns and objections was surprising to me. More acutely every day, people who are underserved for internet connectivity are severely disadvantaged in that acute deficit of connectivity. Most of what I read here seemed to be common sense to me in terms of moving communities forward towards the ubiquity of high-quality internet access that I think is necessary. I felt there was enough qualifiers in the recommendations and report that I was quite happy to support the resolution that was recommended. And that we don't want to miss this wave of opportunity when it comes to funding and attention regarding rural connectivity, lest we be left behind and then make the decisions and have the realizations how important this is, only to find that the funding opportunities may not be available. So that being said, I think there is some weight here given to concerns of individual communities and what their priorities are. And I think through the implementation of a strategy like this necessitates more engagement, more discussion, and more fine-tuning. But I was quite happy to support the recommendations outlined here, again, with the qualifiers that are contained within the report and recommendations. So I won't move it, but I would if I hadn't heard so many objections or concerns about what's been presented here. But from a perspective of a technology professional, the barriers that we're putting up to communities through lack of connectivity, and I like the preference for us focusing first on internet connectivity to the home and sort of pushing out that sort of cellular conversation a little bit further. But in terms of having high-speed, reliable connectivity to the home, that has to be a priority for all local governments, and we have to move quickly enough that we can take advantage of the funding and opportunities and the focus of resources that are being put into it, not only at our local government tables, but provincial and federal tables as well. It would be a real opportunity lost for a region like Cowichan, who is so progressive and forward-looking, not to move forward with these recommendations and, in fact, in my mind, pursue them with some vigor. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stone. I'm just going to go to Mr. Robbins here for a quick question on process. Are we able to, if I was so inclined to recognize Director Stone and test the House on the motion that's been provided in the report and see how that were to go, and if it wasn't supported, could we then take the advice of Director Douglas and go to a referral motion after?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you for that. Is it a point of order?
No. Just that before I can answer that question, vote on that, I need to know, Mr. Reardon had mentioned this gas tax revenues. My tax staff, if our gas tax revenue grants being allocated to anywhere else?
I think we're awaiting a new round of gas tax at this point. So, yeah, our building communities fund, yes. Yeah, hang on, everyone. Mr. O'Riordan, do you have a comment on that?
Just yet, that building community funds is under negotiation right now, so that isn't completed. And there may be other infrastructure opportunities available to support funding also.
Thank you for that, Mr. O'Riordan. So I'm not going to speak really fast, and my calm exterior belies my turmoil interior trying to get the meeting done through so we can get to the rest of our other meetings. Two questions. You'd mentioned free Wi-Fi at community sites, and I ask this because that would be something that would be very helpful to a lot of my communities. Right now, and Director Nicholson's right, we're kind of a recreation area, and people send their kids and grandkids out to Honeymoon Bay and Missachi Lake, and they skulk around the community hall because there's a little bit of Wi-Fi available at the community hall. So I'm hoping that this is a policy that would be endorsed across communities. Now, I hear people say things like, we don't want to have kids on their phones in the parks. But you know what? Having our kids in our parks is a really good idea. And if they happen to have their phone with them and doing something online, that's not a bad idea either. So is that a doable thing throughout our communities? That's my first question. Anybody want to take that one? Barry's up at the mic.
Yeah, I think this is already, maybe John Elzinga would like to take this one. Thank you.
Good handoff. I like it. Mr. Elzinga.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, can you repeat the question?
Do we have the possibility of extending the 3G, 4G, 5G into our communities and parks so that we've got people can go into the parks and actually use their smartphone or computers?
Is it possible? I would say to you, Mr. Chair, the answer is yes, but there certainly have to be a lot of work done, and I don't know the financial ramifications of what you're asking.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Yep.
Last point, and this is something that's probably not been considered, but the issue of fluent speakers in Dididud. There's not that many left. And this is important. This technology is hugely important for people to be able to preserve and expand and grow their language in communities. And so I was so thrilled to see the work that was done for that community. It's part of Area F, and I think there's been some really great work done on this. Yeah, there may be some issues that individual members may have throughout this, but there's some great opportunities here, and it seems like there's still a fair bit of money flowing from other orders of government that will help us to make this happen. So with that, I'm going to turn to, you want to fight it out there, Director Stone and Director Douglas? Do you want to test the House, Director Stone?
I've moved the recommendation.
There is a seconder. Any discussion, Director Douglas?
Just a point of clarification, Mr. Chair, with regards to the point raised by Director Nicholson, if we do pass the recommendation, does that preclude us from exploring some of those concerns that Director Nicholson's raised about extending some of this infrastructure in certain areas that may be geared more to recreational properties, potentially opening them up to development that may not fit with the regional district's objectives?
Well, I'm looking to staff, but I think that's a given, at least from my perspective. Any staff want to jump in on that? Mr. O'Riordan.
I'm maybe not qualified to speak on that, but I would think through the OCP process that would be the appropriate place to address those questions. So I don't think it would be a concern to endorse.
I've got Director McClinton next, Director Stone to close.
I was just seconding the motion.
Fantastic. Any other discussion on the item? Can you read the resolution, Mr. Robbins?
You said I was next, so.
Oh, sorry. Director Stone, you're next. Sorry.
OCP policies would lay out land use for areas like Kaikous. I think that it's important that, whether connectivity be provided or not for recreational use, that land use policies should inform whether development would proceed.
Mr. Robbins, the resolution.
That it be recommended to the board that the Cowichan Regional Internet and Cellular Connectivity Strategy recommendations be endorsed and advanced as staff resources and priorities allow.
Remind everyone, this is one director, one vote. Call a question. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? One opposed, the motion carries. I want to take this time to, two opposed, sorry. Director Nicholson, something further to this item? Please.
Thanks. I'd like to make a motion that we forward the report with a cover letter to our MP encouraging him to pass this on to whatever the committee's name is that was mentioned.
So it'd be recommended to the board that the CVRD write a letter to our member of parliament with this report. Any seconder? Okay, I got seconders and I got Director Martman with a question on this, and we're really, really running late, everyone. Director Martman.
Did you mean MPs? Plural?
Yes, I did. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? None opposed, the motion carries. Thank you so much for your great report, and we'll no doubt be pouring through this and having staff working on it. I think that you've really provided us with some amazing food for thought. I thought it was very well put together and very succinct, and I want to thank you, and I think we'll even give you the round of applause for a great report.
Thank you very much. It's been a great opportunity to work with everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Okay, this is one of these, do we plow through? Yes, we do. We've got our next report up is from the General Manager Corporate Services Couch and Housing Association Review. Ms. Mohan, would you please introduce our guests?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to introduce Shelley Cook of the Couch and Housing Association. She's here to give you an overview of the work of the association planned for this year. The report that you have in your package is just basically an FYI so that you understand sort of what the working relationship is and the funding arrangement is between the CVRD and the Couch and Housing Association, which is a financial contribution service, and gives you some of the balances that are in the current Housing Trust Fund. And with that, I will hand you over to Shelley, and I'll be available at the end for any questions along with Shelley.
Ms. Cook, welcome.
Thank you
Thank you
so
for your
much.
patience, by the way.
My pleasure. Internet connectivity is very important. Digital divide is a big concern.
Directors?
I will do what I can. We're wrapping up by noon is the hope.
You go as long as you need to.
Okay. I do have a presentation. I was hoping to, yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yes, take all the time you need.
Feeling a little panicked here. Okay, thanks. Thank you.
You've got,
I like
think
a good challenge, but
you need 30 minutes about.
I will move through as quickly as I can. There tends to be quite a bit of interest when I present, so that allowing opportunities for that is a big concern as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair. All right, so we can certainly move through this. To Chair's point, I'll just move through the land acknowledgement. So thank you so much for the opportunity to be here today. This is a follow-up to a discussion that started in February, and a lot of questions about certainly how we work in terms of our mandate as an organization, our funding, our programs, and essentially how sort of we meet the objectives of our agreements with the CVRD. So there's a lot of thinking, and I've encountered a lot of discussions in the community about the work of Cowichan Housing Association and what we do. So I think it's really important to go back to our agreements, our constitution as an organization, to understand what the purpose of the organization is according to those agreements. So there is $750,000 that's collected annually. $500,000 goes towards the Housing Trust. It's all within the Housing Trust, but this goes directly to the community. So this is money that we provide through the Rental Housing Capital Contribution Fund, as well as the Project Development Fund and Emergency Assistance. So just to read, the increase to the point under the CVRD agreement is to increase affordable housing and prevent homelessness in the CVRD through research, community development, homelessness prevention program, and facilitating affordable housing development. So I think that's a really important piece to just be really, really clear on. So here we start to see within sort of some of the themes talked about here is things like leveraging, building capacity, coordination and collaboration. So you'll hear these themes throughout my presentation. They're important in terms of our agreements and expectations in the community, as well as just the work that needs to be done based on what we're hearing and seeing. So essentially, this $500,000 group supply to Cowichan Housing Association. The application goes to our allocations committee, and then it goes to the CVRD for CBRD board for approval. So that is not money we have access to as an organization. It sits at the CBRD until there is a project that is viable, and then that money is flows through CHA to the individual organization. So essentially, there's about $800,000 currently in the Housing Trust, and about $890,000 has been given out. So that is over 3 projects, including project development funding and rental housing capital contribution fund. So I can certainly speak to that in more detail in a moment. So then the $250,000 is provided for operations. So specifically, our expectations on CHA under that piece is operating programs, including research and community outreach for the purpose of planning, housing development coordination, and housing loss prevention. So again, you're starting to see these themes around coordination. You'll see increased themes around leveraging, right? Partnerships and funding opportunities, including in-kind donations. So what we do with that money essentially is we start off by, first of all, setting up a society and opening an office. Immediately takes approximately $60,000 of that money. So that includes insurance, office equipment, accounting, software fees, website hosting, all of those sorts of things that require. So then we have about $190,000 in which we pay for 3 staff. So that includes myself and 2 other staff. And with that, we pay for Merck's nominal benefits packages, wage, as well as vacation time. So that is what's sort of included. And this is really the work that we're doing specifically under that particular service. And I'll get into a lot of detail about what that looks like under the areas that we're building out our work. So this is our constitution as an organization. So for nonprofit organizations, this is sort of our backbone, right? So this was developed. So what you'll see here again is operation, development of affordable housing, administering the Housing Trust Fund, education, both tenants and landlords is a piece that comes up, homelessness prevention, planning and response, and awareness raising. So again, these are sort of similar, but maybe take it in a bit more of a community education, a homelessness prevention direction. So this is from the Attainable Housing Strategy developed by Cowichan Housing Association in 2019. So it was released not long before COVID-19. So the world has changed significantly since that time. But once again, we see things like building capacity, partnerships and collaboration. These are areas where CHA's work was really identified. Education, providing input into local government policy frameworks around is just general input and recommendations. And so this is very much reflected in the programs and services we provide. So I thought something that would be really useful is to take a look at the funding of the organization over the last several years. So what we see here is 2021. And what you'll notice is that the CBRD portion, the 250, I'm not counting 750, that's not money we collect, 250,000 is 13% of our funding. And what you'll really notice here is there was a lot of opportunity at this time around COVID response money. And so the funding that we have is very much a reflection of opportunities that exist, as well as needs, and including really pressing community needs at the time. So you see a little bit of a smattering there, but by and large, a lot of COVID response dollars. So then what we see in the following fiscal year, is slightly reduced in terms of the COVID response, and the village comes into play. And so that's about 82% of our funding. So the CVRD is about 9%. And so in this year, for every dollar we received from the CVRD, we're able to leverage 10 in additional funding. In the year prior, it was 8. So you'll see a bit of a variation over the years, how we're able to sort of maximize and draw in additional funds through the CVRD funding that we receive. So this is this is last year. And we're about to, well, this is the current year, but we're just about to move into the next fiscal year. So we are on a March 31st to April 1st. And so what you notice here again is this is for every dollar, we brought in $6. So there's no COVID response money. We see a lot of UBCM funds, and we see an increasing amount from Reaching Home. So Reaching Home is our federal homelessness strategy money that is administered through United Way. And in order to receive this funding, there's certain projects that we have to be providing as a community. And one was the coordinated access that Milena Patnaud spoke to you about when we were here last time. So I just wanted to make that clear. And so now moving into what is the next and soon to be our current fiscal year. This is where we're sitting right now. And so we got CVRD at about 14%. We see rent bank. So I'm going to speak to you in a minute about some of the new programs that we have starting and how they fall in terms of our specific service pillars that are really about how we're building out our work in the community. So we see an increase in reaching home funds through coordinated access and point in time count. Essentially, again, so it is about $7. So for every dollar from CVRD, we're bringing in about $7 additional dollars. So just one comment about how nonprofits often work. For us to build capacity, to be able to take on another piece of work, to bring on another staff person, instead of coming back to you to ask every time, we need to increase $50,000, we need to increase $100,000. What we do as nonprofits in the other contracts we take on, we build in a little bit of piece of my time and my bookkeeper, her time as well. So what we're able to then do is to sort of use, so we're doing that work, but we're able to then offset the funds from CVRD and then use it to fund other things. So again, I'll give you an example was the Mill Bay Waterworks analysis for a project that we're trying to move forward. That was paid that way through these funds. And so it just allows us different opportunities. So I think sometimes people don't understand how nonprofit organizations work in terms of how they build in capacity within the organization. So this is very common practice, and this is really how we do our work to be able to build out our services. So these, and I'll talk to you about our programs under these specific pillars. So when I started, and I've talked to you previously about this, these are really the core themes that I'm seeing that fit nicely, again, when we're talking about those leveraging, right, partnerships and funding, we're talking about planning and coordination, we're talking about capacity building. All of these things fit really, really well under these themes. And so I'm going to talk to you about our services specifically in relation to these themes. So we'll start with housing loss prevention and navigation. So these are our programs coming up for this April 1st. So we have Cowichan Rent Bank starting. So this is a brand new project. This is a significant partnership with BC Rent Bank. So this is a big initiative for Cowichan Housing Association. We also have our utility bank. What this is a partnership we have with BC Hydro, and we're building out partnership more thoroughly with Fortis. And I'll talk to you a little bit in a minute about what that looks like, because we hear constantly about the needs around hydro and issues with people being able to afford it. It's that dueling sort of rent hydro issue that we're hearing all the time that really compelled us to look deeper into how we can be working with the community to address it. So we're providing energy savings kits, energy efficiency coaching, and helping people navigating their sort of crisis grant and emergency assistance process, as well as being able to follow back on our own emergency assistance to help people. So it's just another layer. Cowichan Happy Pad we implemented already. We have emergency assistance, so we help with rental arrears. We have a food voucher program. We provide housing navigation and support, so that's really about helping people identify appropriate housing and access it. Information and referrals to outside organizations. So in thinking again about how we sort of do that work, some of that's done under the CVRD sort of envelope, but the vast majority of that is done under funding for specific programs like Rent Bank and Reaching Home. So just to speak to a few pending applications that I'm really hoping I'll be able to come back and let you know we've been successful. So we've applied with BC Housing to do a rent supplement program, focusing on families, seniors, and Indigenous and other impacted communities. We have also applied to develop a Cowichan Housing Help Center. So what this will be is very much a public-facing, full-service help center where people can come and get hands-on support, be able to access computer, copier, phones, and assistance in a way that we aren't currently set up to provide. So this is really sort of, again, a full-service community resource where people can have access to whatever support they need related to housing. And this is the project I sort of referenced earlier related to Fortis BC. I'm really excited about the potential for us to be working closely with Fortis and also Cowichan Tribes, but the other bands in our region to be building out what they call the Climate Action Partnership Program. So we could actually be retaining staff to go and do the energy efficiency upgrades and help people then navigate the rebate system. So essentially it comes out virtually basically a wash for homeowners, for bands, based on the cost. So this is something we're exploring, and I should know fairly soon about all of these projects. And so they're all significant and really beneficial. Very quickly, research planning and coordination. So we've provided input and certainly working closely with Barry and Brittany on the workforce housing strategy and doing what we can to support that work. Also providing input into North Cowichan affordable housing policy. So that's including definitions, background supporting research, whatever we can. Point in time count. So that's upcoming April 12th. So this is the first one we've had since 2020. This is really important to sort of gauge. And so I identified this when I was here with Milena. But this is really our first information on what has changed, and what we're seeing really in who is counted among the homeless since COVID, if we can really think about being post-COVID. Last week we had a wonderful event to wrap up our sort of Stream 1 poverty reduction planning. So what this is really about is really looking at our system of housing and health services and how we are working with community to ensure that we are working in the best way to support the work that needs to be done. So we'll be submitting an application, actually has gone in for additional funding to really be able to support the work of the committees. And so this will be really key to really reinvigorating the work of the Homeless Coalition. Grant administration. So this is a piece where we are helping shepherd grants through the approval process and making sure that we're finding providers, and we get a nominal administration. Usually we're between 1% and 10% feedback, and this then helps us to build capacity, as I talked about previously. And so this is a really important resource for the community, and it's been a lot of work behind the scenes to get that started and moving forward. I participate in a variety of coalitions, meetings, networks that constantly come up. So on an ongoing basis, probably about 3 or 4 a month. I recently participated in a public forum with investors talking about affordable housing and what specifically the needs are. And this is just part of the work we're doing to try and work with developers to understand what their challenges are, how we can support them, but develop sort of relationships where we can move towards housing agreements and management of potentially housing units in perpetuity as affordable units that are accessed by people who are in need. And we're working on an innovative pilot project helping to support that work through Work BC and Ethos. So you can see I have quite a lot of other projects in mind for the research component, including one around the affordable housing inventory, and then sort of applying various definitions that we're working on right now. So I'll be back to talk more about that in the future. And so finally, advocacy, housing, right? So project development funding, capacity building, all those sorts of things. So here is our regional housing service, or what you talk about as a housing trust fund. So this is where we're constantly sort of pushing that. We're trying to support the groups that have applied. We have an emergency assistance program, and right now the biggest group we're supporting through that is the remaining tenants at the Magdalena. And I think people are aware of what happened in that situation. So we have a couple of CHA-led projects that are really about seniors housing or family housing. There's one in Mill Bay. I referenced a water works analysis study that's related to that. And then I'm working with a group in Ladysmith to really try and sort of advance a couple different projects and really just trying to see where we can, advance the objectives and certainly work with individual local governments to try and support the work that they're certainly doing. Housing partnerships, we have a partnership right now with Cowichan Tribes. We have a capital grant for a homelessness project within the city of Duncan. And again, having lots of conversations about management operation of affordable units and how we can do that. There's a conference planned. We have May, June here. It's actually been pushed back to the fall. This will be a really important networking event to help ensure that we're connecting developers. I get a lot of questions about how to connect in with BC Housing, get their funding, CMHC. So this is a big point of that. Really working closely with the next point, the Cowichan Nonprofit Housing Provider Network that I established. So it's all of our nonprofit housing providers to talk talk about their challenges and how we can support, and they provided some great input into what they'd like to see at the conference. And then, again, the ongoing work to support the temporary cabins at the village. And again, the attention that work has garnered. I had 2 or 3 media interviews already this week just talking about that. So again, that piece has just sort of blossomed in different ways that have been really positive. And so I think I've spoken faster than any one person should, and my apologies. But I would very much like to take the opportunity to field any questions and clarify what I spoke so quickly about.
I was
So my
wondering when you
apologies.
were going to breathe.
I'm not sure that I did. I'm still standing though, so thank you.
Shelley, that was spectacular. I just want to turn to my colleagues and staff just on the requirement to be starting our noon meeting within 15 minutes, correct? So I'm going to turn to everyone and say, we really have to be succinct and short. We have to be online at 12:15 for our next meeting. So with that, I'll go to Director Toporowski, Douglas, and Stone, and that's probably all that, okay. Go ahead, Deborah, Director Toporowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be quick because you answered my questions that I had written down within your presentation. Just wanted to thank you for all your hard work and the information. I don't know if I'm talking close enough for the person online, but just wanted to thank you for all your hard work and everything that you're doing. And I know how hard it is to be on that front line, to be that person to be there for everyone. And I'm really happy about the Hydro and Fortis and working with Cowichan Tribes and all of those things. I know we have an incredible community here, and when we get together to do something and advocate for some whatever project that is for the government, they're always liking that we have the information at hand. Last point, Chair. So your conferences moved to the fall, and I know there was a point in place count. I know that there was something during the pandemic that there was a rise in seniors becoming homeless, so I didn't know if you had any numbers for that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for your question, and I really appreciate the support. And it's a very rewarding, but at times very challenging role, certainly. Yes, I think we've anecdotally and through individual tracking, we presume that the homeless count will tell us what we already know in terms that there's been a significant rise in seniors housing. We're also seeing an increase among sort of younger people, certainly being quite challenged, so youth specifically. What we're also seeing is sort of just, again, the diversity of people who are out there, right? So you're seeing people who are quite different than what we've normally seen on the street. So issues of affordability are driving homelessness like never before. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Douglas.
Yeah, Ms. Cook, I had a quick question with regards to the point in time homeless
Move
count.
in closer, please.
How's that? Better? Just question. All right, okay, there. How's that? Better? Yeah, right on. With regards to point in time homeless count, I know with the last one that was done in March 2020, there was concern that we were undercounting the number of people living on the street. I know that was a concern right across BC and different communities that undertook this exercise. I'm wondering if there's any plans in place to ensure that we get as accurate of a number as possible, because I know as you'll appreciate the more accurate we can get with that number, it's going to put us in a much better position in terms of advocacy with the senior levels of government to make sure that we get the resources we need to address some of these challenges.
Thank you so much for your question, Director Douglas. I think that's a really, really important point. And we know this is only a snapshot, but it is important to get as fulsome of a snapshot as we possibly can. So what we first did is hire somebody who is very, very connected to homelessness in the broader CBRD and knows all the players. What she's been able to do is bring in people in the know, including sort of people who work specifically with youth teams, people who specifically work on Cowichan Tribes, and specifically people who work in different areas of the communities, to be able to identify where people are, so that we are working together in a way that really starts to illuminate the problem in I think a really real significant kind of way, as well as the issues that people are grappling with that brought them into homelessness as well. So I think it's always a challenge, but I think we're well situated to have a really robust and really good count this time.
And I'm just going to remind everyone, we have 4 minutes before we have to be started our next meeting. Director Stone.
I just wanted to say thank you for the great explanation. I think in our last discussion, I think it was a good and necessary thing. And I also want to say that this weekend, we're finally officially opening the Heart on the Hill in Ladysmith, which is supported by the Cowichan Housing Association. We got to tour it last week. It's a fantastic facility, and I hope that we can move forward on more similar projects in the region over the next few years with more support and hopefully more expedited support from senior government like BC Housing and the forthcoming BC Builds. Thanks.
Thank you for that comment. Director Nicholson to close.
Shelley, thank you very much. You do great work. Thank you. Next time when you come, could you provide a breakdown of the $500,000 fund, trust fund, and how it's spent over time?
Sure, I could do that quickly.
Don't worry about it now,
I
but next
won't.
time
But
that would
I
be
could
great.
also send information to just quickly break that down, if that'd be helpful. Or just
Next time's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I certainly will.
Okay, everybody, speed applause for Shelley and the report. Thank you, Shelley.
Motion.
Mr. Robbins,
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
seconded, all in favor? Any opposed?